Dean, speaking as an old brain scientist, I know that our molecules are exchanged, our neurons change. We think we have this identity. I feel like I'm the same person, but everything about me has changed since I've been a child, even since last week. The molecules are different. How is it that I think I'm the same person?
Well, I mean, you might just think you are. So it may really be that there's a series of thinkers here, and each one says, "Oh, I've been around for years and years," and some of them are wrong, right? Well, all of them are wrong. All of them are wrong. I think the answer to the question whether am I around for X number of years, it just depends on what kind of thing I am. So I know that I'm a thinking thing of some kind. What am I? And then you look at that thing and you see what its persistence conditions are. Now, there's a point of view about the metaphysics of objects, anything that exists in time, called the doctrine of temporal parts. And if you have that view, then this question looks very different
what
than if you
mean?
Don't have
Explain
this
that.
view. So the doctrine of temporal parts is the idea that in the same way that this table is, it fills this space by having a different part for the different parts of the space.
Sure.
Something that lasts through time fills the time by having a different part for each part of the time. So to use Russell's metaphor, I'm like a figure in a film where there's a different still frame, sort of, for each instant.
Okay, now I can understand in a physical object because we know that there are literal things, atoms or subatomic parts, that line up together in some crystalline structure or whatever and fill a space.
Different ones here, different ones there.
Yeah, but on time, that's not clear. I mean, although some people are now talking quantized time.
Well, let's suppose it's continuous. Let's suppose it's continuous, but that there are instants, continuum many, instants. This view would have it that at each instant, there's a momentary person here. And you slap them all together. It's like that Snickers bar commercial where it's sliced up and then they go back together. There's all these momentary slices, instantaneous three-dimensional me's, and you put them all together and that's me. What makes personal identity, or what kind of thing I am, look different on this view is that there's all kinds of sums of these objects that you could be interested in. So you might be interested in just adolescent Dean, which is a sum of temporal parts that stops, at somewhere in the 70s. Let's not be any more specific. And then there's the second half of my life. There's just today. There's the me of today. These are all different aggregates of temporal parts. When I use the word I, I'm referring to something. Which one of those? Well, presumably not one that just includes all of my temporal parts up till today and that leaves out later ones. I'm referring to something that's longer than that. But what are its precise contours? Well, if you're a temporal parts theorist, I think you should think it's like that is partly dependent on your self-conception. In the same way that if I point to a body of water, and let's say it's a bay, I say that water. I'm going to call it, Dean's water, right? Well, you don't know whether I'm referring to a bay or an ocean, or the water that happens to be there now and that will soon flow out of the bay and mix with the rest of the water. What matters is what I'm thinking about. So there's all these spatial objects of varying sizes. Which one I referred to depends in part upon what I was thinking. And when I use the word I, if I'm a temporal parts theorist, I think I might mean a bunch of different things. So maybe I mean something that would survive when my brain is transplanted into another body. Maybe I don't. Maybe I mean something that would survive teletransportation. Maybe I don't. And I think if you're a temporal parts theorist, you think the objects exist. There's an object that ceases to be when teletransportation occurs.
And there's a new object?
and there's another object that starts at that shows up at the point where you're teletransported to, and then there's yet a third object which includes both. Oh. Now, which one was I referring to? Well, which one was I interested in? So on a temporal parts view, there's a lot of flexibility about my persistence conditions, or at least there's flexibility about the persistence conditions of whatever kind of thing I might be referring to.
I'm following what you're saying, and it's interesting, and it's sort of fun, but it doesn't seem to have any relevance to to the reality of my continuing as a unified self.
Well, I think your gut instincts there are good. I mean, I think the temporal parts view is false. That's things don't persist through time by, well, not persisting, or by having new things all the time. So if that's not how we persist, right, then we have to find the thing that is thinking and see what it is. Is it something that lasts through time, or isn't it? I mean, if it's an organ, let's say it's the brain, well, what are the persistence conditions for an organ like the brain? Right. Can it survive being torn apart and then put back together? No, it would be a different brain then. On the other hand, suppose that there is an immaterial thing that's sort of somehow connected with my brain, and that it's the real thinker. Well, then my persistence conditions are its persistence conditions. I will go where it goes, and where it's buried, there I'll be buried, or whatever. So
we have to, in a sense, try to find what the core essence of a human thinker is, yes, before we can answer this question about the continuity?
I think that's right. And I think if you were a temporal parts theorist, you wouldn't think that way.
All right, so integrating it all together, what do you feel is the core element that causes us to have this sense of personal identity?
Well, I suppose what gives us a sense of it is memory. So we have thoughts that place us in the past, right? Now we know that our memories can be faulty, though. So this might be just completely an illusion, right? What I think matters is not what I remember, but what kind of thing I am. So we should look at whatever it is that's thinking, do our best to figure out what that is. If it's a brain, well, I go with the brain. If it's an immaterial soul, well, I go wherever that goes. On the other hand, if you're a temporal parts kind of person, if you really believe this metaphysics of temporal parts, this won't look so inevitable to you. But I think for you and me, we're attracted to the idea that temporal parts is wrong, and whatever I turn out to be, whatever turns out to be doing my thinking, that thing is me, and I will go where it goes.